Virgo, the divine origin of Virgo, what the scriptures reveal about her destiny. He has a kind of tiredness that Virgo knows well. It's not the tiredness of someone who has worked too hard. It's not the fatigue of someone who has slept poorly. It's something else, more subtle, deeper, harder to name. It's the tiredness of noticing, of seeing what's wrong when everyone else seems to see nothing, of sensing the misalignment in a room, in a conversation, in a situation, and not being able to simply let it go. This internal sensor that never shuts off, that points out flaws with almost surgical precision, that doesn't rest until everything is in its right place. Virgo has known this since childhood, this state of constant vigilance that no one asked for, but that has also never been possible to turn off. And for a long time, perhaps even now, Virgo has learned to treat this as a problem, as an excessive demand, as a hypersensitivity that needs to be contained, excused aloud before anyone notices. I know I'm very detail-oriented. Sorry, I overthink things. Virgo has internalized the narrative that this internal sensor is a factory defect, that the intensity with which they feel, analyze, and perceive the world is a characteristic that needs to be toned down so that they can belong. But what if that narrative were completely wrong? What if this sensor wasn't a defect, but a mark, not a flaw in character, but a signature of origin? There is a tradition far older than modern astrology, far older than magazine horoscopes, a tradition that has spanned millennia in sacred texts, in hermetic manuscripts, in symbols engraved on temple walls long before any of us were born. And this tradition does not describe Virgo as the sign of criticism, rigidity, and meticulous attention to detail. It describes Virgo with a completely different word. A word that, when you hear it for the first time, causes a very specific strangeness, the strangeness of recognizing something you always knew, but never had the words to say. That word is election, not in the political sense. In the original sense, the sense that the scriptures used when they wanted to describe someone who was called to a function that transcends the ordinary. Someone whose inner constitution, the way they perceive, feel, and process the world is not accidental. It is instrumental. It is part of a greater purpose that does not need to be fully understood to be fully lived. The world's oldest civilizations placed Virgo at the center of their cosmologies. Ancient Egypt called her Isis, not the servant, but the guardian of sacred knowledge, the one who knew how to reconstruct what was fragmented. Greece called her Demeter, figures of a power that operates in invisible cycles, in the transformations that happen beneath the surface, in the silent work that sustains everything that exists above. And the most enigmatic text of the Christian canon, the Apocalypse of John, describes a figure that ancient astrologers identified with Virgo, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars. Not a figure of submission, a figure of cosmic coronation. This is no coincidence. It's a pattern, and when something appears as a pattern in traditions that never communicated directly, in cultures separated by oceans and centuries, the only reasonable conclusion is that this pattern is pointing to something real, to something that predates any theory, to something that Virgo already carried before it had words for it. And somehow, Virgo always knew this, and the question that remains unanswered is inevitable. Why didn't Virgo know yet? Why would Virgo, being all of that, guardian, chosen one, described with a crown of stars in the oldest existing texts, arrive here without ever having truly heard of it? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It's not a book about astrology in the usual sense. It's a book about what to do when you finally understand that what you've always treated as your biggest problem is in fact your rarest ability. It speaks directly to Virgo, to that specific place where discernment has become self-criticism, where the gift of perception has become a habit of self-judgment. And it offers not consolation, but clarity. A framework for understanding how to redirect this instrument to where it should always have been pointed, outward, towards purpose, towards what Virgo came to build in the world. You are in that moment right now, recognizing something that has always been there but never had a name. This recognition is often accompanied by a very specific discomfort, the feeling that you always knew this, but it took you a while to allow it to be true. This is exactly the moment to act, not later, now, while it is still active within you. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, when was the last time you treated your ability to perceive everything as a gift, not a burden? Write it below. It matters. Virgo's inner sensor has a name in the Hermetic tradition. The Greeks called it nous, not simply intelligence, but something more specific. The ability to perceive what is misaligned with reality, to distinguish, with a precision bordering on the supernatural, what is true from what is mere appearance. Nous is not trained, it is conferred, it is not developed by will. It is activated by a specific constitution that some beings carry from birth. Think of a high-precision filter, not the common filter, the one that removes visible particles. The laboratory filter is designed to capture contaminants on a molecular scale. The water that passes through it looks the same as any other water, but the difference is felt by those who drink it. Those with a refined palate notice it immediately, and those who don't simply don't understand what you're talking about when you try to describe it. This is exactly how Virgo operates in the world. What she perceives, what she feels, what she identifies as discordant, all of this passes through a filter that most people don't possess. And because most don't possess it, Virgo often finds herself in an impossible position, perceiving things she can't prove, feeling misalignments she can't articulate in a way that others understand, living in a state of consciousness that isolates her precisely because of what makes her extraordinary. And then something happens that the scriptures describe with disturbing consistency across all traditions. The bearer of the nous, when he does not understand the nature of what he carries, turns the instrument against himself. The world's most precise scalpel, in the hands of a surgeon who has forgotten he was trained to heal others, begins to operate on himself, without anesthesia. With the same precision that should be used to identify misalignment in the outside world, Virgo begins to catalogue his own flaws, to dissect his own insecurities, to find with devastating competence all the ways in which he is still not enough. This is the cycle that the scriptures call crisis, the judgment that condemns, that sees the flaw and stops there, that uses the error as a permanent definition. And Virgo, with her extraordinary instrument of perception when she enters crisis, does not do so lightly. She does it with a precision that she herself cannot switch off. What would need to happen for this scalpel to once again become an instrument of healing and not self-punishment? The Hermetic scriptures have an answer for this, but it doesn't come from where Virgo expects. It's not an external revelation. It's not validation that comes from the outside. It's a recognition that happens from within. An instant when the bearer of the nous realizes they were using the instrument in the wrong direction. The texts call this moment anagnorisis, recognition, not dramatic, not suddenly, silent, like almost everything in Virgo. The distinction that Hermetic texts make is between crisis and diacrisis. Crisis is the judgment that condemns. Diacrisis is the discernment that illuminates, that sees failure as information, not as a sentence, that uses error as a compass, not as a definition. Virgo was born with diacrisis, but over time, due to environments that didn't know what to do with her sensitivity, she learned to operate in crisis. She learned to condemn where she should have discerned. And that's the turning point the scriptures describe, not as conquest, but as return, not as becoming something new, but as reclaiming what was always there before it was distorted. And it is here that the path begins to make sense in a different way. The digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, exists precisely for this moment. For when Virgo has already named the cycle, has already seen the scalpel being used against itself, but still doesn't have the tools to make the transition from crisis to diacrisis in a conscious and sustained way. It doesn't promise ease, it promises clarity. And for Virgo, clarity is the only fuel that truly works. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. The text of the Apocalypse of John was written in a context of persecution. The author exiled on an island, describing visions in code to those who knew the symbols. And in one of these symbols, in chapter 12, appears the figure, a woman clothed with the sun. With the moon under her feet, the emotional cycle not suppressed but mastered. With 12 stars in her crown. In labor, not of weakness, but of creation, of something new being brought into the world through a pain that has purpose. Hellenistic astrologers identified this figure with Virgo with a unanimity that surprises anyone researching the subject for the first time. And when you look at the symbols, the purity of intention, the discernment that separates the sacred from the profane, the invisible work that sustains what is visible, the connection makes sense in a way that goes beyond academic analysis. It feels right on the skin. But here is the paradox that the scriptures don't directly resolve. If Virgo is described in this way, with grandeur, with a crown of 12 stars, why did she arrive here acting as if she needed to prove she deserved to be in the room? In all sacred traditions, without exception, the chosen one does not know that he is chosen. This is the fundamental condition of election. Moses did not know. Jonah did not want to. Election never comes with a certificate, with external validation, with the confirmation that Virgo so desperately seeks before allowing herself to believe that what she carries has value. Election arrives as a weight, as a responsibility without explanation, as an ability that seems like a burden until the moment the purpose of that ability is revealed. For Virgo, this weight manifests as a demand that never rests, like a sensor that never fully shuts off, like the persistent feeling that things could be better, more aligned, more truthful, and that somehow it's up to her to make it happen. Not because you asked for it, because you perceive it, and perceiving, when you're in a room where no one else notices, is the quietest burden there is. What the scriptures say about this, and here's the part that changes everything, is that this burden is not accidental, that the ability to bear what others cannot is not a curse. It is the mark of a specific constitution, designed for a function that the world needs, even when it doesn't know it needs it. Imagine an architect who receives the blueprint for an extraordinary building without anyone explaining what that building will be. He builds with absolute precision because precision is his natural instrument. But he carries the weight of not knowing the purpose of what his hands are building until the day the building is finished. And then everything makes sense. This is the moment that Virgo is approaching. The bearer of the noose does not receive the purpose first. They receive the instrument. The purpose is revealed in the use. And this means that Virgo does not need to fully understand in order to act fully. Discernment, precision, the ability to perceive what is wrong, all of this is already functioning, already fulfilling a greater function than Virgo can see from within. But recognizing this, accepting that the instrument has a purpose before fully understanding what that purpose is, requires a specific kind of courage that the scriptures of all traditions describe with the same structure. The courage to trust in what you carry before the world confirms that it is worth carrying. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac, signed to a life of purpose, maps this process with a specificity that will surprise Virgos. It doesn't speak of election in an abstract way. It speaks of the concrete mechanism by which Virgo's instrument of perception, the nous, the filter, the scalpel, can be redirected in a practical and sustainable way, without losing what makes you who you are. Recovering what the scriptures have always said was there. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is a compass that Virgo has kept in a drawer for years. It's that inner guidance she's always had but has learned to distrust. Because Virgo's compass is so sensitive that it points to truths that the surrounding environment doesn't want to confirm. That it points to misalignments that others prefer not to see. That it points sometimes to a north that no one else can see. And Virgo, over time, learned to put away that compass, to seek external validation before acting on what the internal instrument had already clearly signaled. Because being the only person in the room who sees something can be very lonely. It can seem arrogant. It can seem like you're inventing problems where they don't exist. And so it's easier to put away the compass and let others decide the direction. To let the majority, who don't feel what you feel, define what is real. But there is a cost to this, a silent cost accumulated over the years that Virgo pays in a very specific currency. The persistent feeling that she made the wrong decision, that she should have trusted what she knew, that the guiding light was there. She saw it, she felt it, and she chose to ignore it because no one else confirmed what the instrument indicated. And the scriptures of all traditions that touched upon Virgo describe a universal pattern. There comes a time when the compass needs to be taken out of the drawer. Not because the world suddenly began to validate what it points to, because the cost of ignoring it became too high, because Virgo realizes with that precision that it can't switch off, that every time it ignored what the instrument indicated, it paid a price it can't name but can feel. It's the price of betraying oneself. And here is the detail that rarely appears in popular readings about Virgo. The nous, when fully directed outward, does not operate solely for the benefit of the bearer. It operates in waves. Virgo's discernment, when correctly oriented, creates clarity in the surrounding environment. The presence of Virgo, the virgin who knows what she carries, has an effect on the space she occupies that goes beyond what any analysis can measure. Anyone who spends time with a Virgo in their right mind knows what this means in practice. There's a quality of presence, an ability to make things clearer simply by being there, to perceive what's wrong with a gentleness that doesn't judge, that only illuminates. This is no coincidence. It's the instrument functioning as it was designed. In the end, after everything, after the sacred texts, the hermetic symbols, the traditions that have spanned millennia, what remains is something much simpler than it seems. Virgos don't need to change who they are. They never have. The sensor was never the problem. The filter was never too excessive. The scalpel was never too sharp. The compass was never wrong about where north was. What happened throughout life, experiences, and environments that didn't know what to do with Virgo's intensity is that she learned to treat the instrument as if it were the problem. The scriptures, in all traditions that touch upon the Virgin, say the same thing with different words. The instrument is rare. The capacity for discernment that the Virgin possesses is not available to everyone. Not because the Virgin is superior, but because each being carries different instruments, and what was conferred upon the Virgin is specific, it is precise, It is designed for a function that the world needs even when it doesn't know it needs it. The woman clothed in sunlight was not a figure of pride. She was a figure of recognition, of someone who had finally understood what she carried and had stopped apologizing for it. This is the destiny that the scriptures reveal about Virgo. Not a grand arrival, not a dramatic transformation, a silent recognition. That moment when you stop, breathe, and realize that what you've always been, demanding, precise, sensitive, analytical, incapable of pretending not to see what you see, was never the problem. That was always the answer. And to carry this lightly, purposefully, with the crown in the right place, that is the origin the scriptures promise. Not for later, not when you finally become enough. Now, exactly as you are.